Welcome everybody to the March 6th, 2025 session of the Technical Advisory Council of the Confidential Computing Consortium. We are an open and collaborative community. Everybody's welcome to join in the conversation here and contribute constructively, just like you are welcome to join in on any of our projects, offering issues, helping solve issues, contributing code. We abide by the antitrust policy of the Linux Foundation, and you can read more about that on linuxfoundation.org/antitrust-policy. I think we have a pretty light agenda today. We've got a good meaty topic. We're hearing from the certifier framework. We've got John and Chris here to talk about that. I think out of that, we might have a little bit more context to return to our project liaison discussion. Give Mark an opportunity, if he is on, to talk about updates from the workload identity initiative. And then since we'll have some time, we may as well check in on our OKRs and make sure that we're clear on those and making progress. Were there any other topics that people anticipated for today? Okay. Well, with that, why don't we check in on our voting members? Let's see if Zoom will let me see the screen again. There we go. Do we have Nathaniel today? Do not see Nathaniel. Thought I saw Paul, but I do not see him, I guess. Catherine, thanks for joining. Always a bad time for Howard. I'm here. I talked to Henry and Kevin offline and got an update. Alec. Let's see, Alec. Fritz, thanks for joining. Yash, thanks. Mingshen, thanks for joining. And we have a new premier company. Do we have Bob? Don't see Bob in the list today. But Shielded Technologies has joined as a premier company. So we have one more TAC voting member. So we'll look forward to being introduced to Bob in the near future. Also, as long as we're talking about intros, I've got it in the announcement slide, but before we lose Haitao, I wanted to introduce everybody to Haitao Wang. Haitao is our new technical community architect for 2025. And he's going to be taking on a little different set of tasks than what we applied for the TCA role last year. So you'll start to see output from Haitao on the blogs, but also probably getting a little bit more involved at a different technical layer. So Haitao, anything you'd like to say as a welcome to the community here? You're on mute.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I used to be a software engineer at Intel. Work on the confidential computing technologies like SGX and TDX. I look forward to collaborate with all of you. And one of the things I think I'm started looking at is the badge for best practice. If I haven't, probably I will bug some of you guys, the member projects. I think that's it for now.
Okay. Great, thanks, Haitao.
Thank you.
Haitao, are you in Sacramento?
You're muted, Haitao. Haitao, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I'm just using some background, some random background.
Okay, so you're not. I'm trying to figure out whether I've met you at Intel.
I'm in Austin, Texas.
Okay. Sorry.
Oh, no.
No, it's good. I was like kind of being able to visualize where everybody's joining from. So looking around the list here, if you are new to the community, feel free to introduce yourself. I think I recognize everybody though. So we'll move right into the remainder of the agenda here. So what we talked about last time, we talked about the workload identity initiative, resumed our conversation that had gone kind of quiet on our role as TAC members with projects, and then checked in on the board agenda items that we would be taking from the TAC to the monthly board meeting. And then we had a engaging tech talk on confidential computing in the age of artificial general intelligence. And we got to see some interesting side channel and covert channel work there from Jacob. So we just talked about the new TCA. So welcome again to Hightown. There was a board meeting, and besides the things that we passed along from our perspective from the TAC, the board voted on a charter change. Would probably be nice to have the context of that change there, but I can just speak to it. We had a restriction in the charter, which is common to Linux Foundation charters, that if you're a company that has a bunch of subsidiaries, only one of those companies can be represented on like the premier level with a vote, and that's kind of intended to limit how much a company could influence voting. But because of our culture of minimum viable governance, voting isn't necessarily like a big issue for us. And so we removed that constraint with the hope that if there are companies that have separate subsidiaries and they all want to be able to join at the premier level, that that will help get all of that participation involved. The trustworthy workload identity. So we're kind of moving in the direction of another acronym here. So TWI, you will have seen on the TAC mail list an update from Mark there in a couple aspects. One is if you go to the CCC calendar, you'll see that's now scheduled on, somebody help me out here, is it Tuesdays or Wednesdays?
On Tuesdays. It was Wednesdays, now it's Tuesdays.
Thank you. So if you've got time, Tuesday morning-ish US times, you can check the calendar for the exact time. Good conversations happening there. And Mark has summarized 4 points that are yet to be sorted out in the charter. Our process in order to become a new SIG or a new working group. I'm sorry, was there a question?
No, sorry. It's early morning. I'm still blowing my nose.
Okay. So in order to get us to become a SIG and have a separate mail list, we want to make sure that everybody is initially organized under a set of deliverables and intentions. So that's the initial effort here. Is there's a lot of potential things that we could do with workload identity. It's a fairly broad problem space, so trying to get more concrete about exactly what it is that will be accomplished sets everything up for more success. And with that, I think we are very quickly then into the annual project review for the certifier framework. And we've got John and Chris on from the project to talk about that. So I will relinquish control. Actually, before I do that, just go out to our governance repo and just remind the TAC members, especially since we've had some new people since the last time we've done a annual update. there's things that we normally check in with on a project. As I was relating to Chris over email, this is sort of the minimal list. We're here to check in and make sure that the project is progressing and understand the general health of the community. But then, of course, we like to understand things at a technical level, especially if there's sort of new technical approaches to things. All of that is open ground for us to cover.
Well, John's going to do the presentation here, but before he does, I just wanted to convey, I think, great news that he was recently elected to the National Academy of Engineering for his work in trusted computing and confidential computing. So congratulations to John on that recognition.
That's great news, John. Congratulations.
Yeah, I'll try not to bring down the average.
Anyway, over to you, John.
Okay, I'm going to share the screen if that's okay, Dan.
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, so it's been roughly a year. I'll remind you of a few things first. When we use the word confidential computing in the framework, we mean any platform that has these standard properties, that it can isolate programs from other programs on the machine, measure the program so it has a unique identity, typically a hash, cryptographic hash, that the platform can store secrets for the program, and that it can attest. We can support either software platforms or hardware platforms, but whichever they are, they should have these characteristics. And again, the tagline, what was the purpose of the confidential computing framework? It was to make writing confidential computing programs early. That's its job in life. So rather than spending months figuring out how a particular platform works and writing your code for that, we wanted something where it was like super quick, like less than an hour if you have a well-written program to convert it to a confidential computing platform. The other thing we're trying to do is disentangle the platform characteristics from the programming interface so that it was abstract and worked everywhere. So if you wrote a program on SGX, it could work on SCV or whatever. And also, we wanted to provide a mechanism to manage these programs. So we have a service that can handle things like updates and changes in the program and all that stuff. So that's just a reminder of what the framework's about and the standard applications. I guess I won't do that again. So let's talk more about the status. The project has monthly meetings and has increased the number of contributors. Samsung, Intel, AMD have been at the meetings. I think Qualcomm has also. I'm not sure. We have a few more users, mostly research institutions. University of Missouri is using it actually for an NSF applied grant. William and Mary. I have started a company with Paul England, who is sort of the father of the trustworthy computing stuff and is on the TPM standardization group, and there are a few others. I've hosted two, what do we call them? Workshops in data privacy at the National Academy of Sciences Cyber Resilience panel, and two of them were on confidential computing, and in fact, there are recordings about them. And I'm about to do some government outreach if my government's still there when I do it. I'm about to give a talk at one government agency. Okay, the technical progress is, part of it is just make sure we don't have bit rot. So there's a new version of prototype, and not protobuf, sorry, which we use. And not to get too far in the weeds, the new version requires C++17 rather than C++11 standard, which actually causes things to break. So I've fixed that. I'm about to check in that change. And I also added a new granular access control for data sharing. As you recall, well, you probably don't recall because I'm not sure you use it, but that interface opened up a secure authenticated channel between two confidential containers. But what you did with that channel is up to you. We're adding a library. So if you want, you can use that channel to serve an API with granular access control. So for example, if you are doing a data sharing application and 6 different groups had 6 different kinds of access control, 6 different accesses to the data you wanted. So, AMD couldn't get Intel's data or all that stuff. You can also authenticate the group, not just the program you're talking to, and put granular access control on roughly a file level for stuff. We've added static analysis. We're probably going to add a Java-like swig. We had a Python swig, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. I don't think we had no license terms problems. So we didn't do anything there. We're almost flags compliant, but we don't compile with the -w all flag right now because it generates too many specious errors in SSL. So we'll probably add that. We have to change something there. Much of the new work is focusing on new programs. This Datica company I said I started, we're looking at adding other platforms. So Android Play Integrity is a platform. It's not quite confidential computing the way you think of SCV, but we can support those 4, characteristics. Raspberry Pi, we believe we can make firmware changes to later versions of Raspberry Pi so that we can guarantee that stuff. We would like to do ARM. We're starting to talk to Qualcomm about doing ARM versions of confidential computing platform and RISC-V. We might do, Apple has a similar thing to Android Integrity Play. We haven't decided whether we're going to do that, but that's another platform we're thinking about. The other thing we're focused on is applications. Factory floor, one of our potential collaborators is the German Academy of Sciences, and their focus is good Germans often are on manufacturing cars. And one of the things we might think of automating is factory floors to make them safe. Firewall walls, we would like to see more client platforms. So some of the platforms I mentioned above are really, we're supporting them because they're client. We would want to support things like secure messaging. I mentioned granular private data sharing, and we're starting to work with other mechanisms, differential privacy, multi-party computation, fully homomorphic encryption, so sort of belt-in suspenders for security.
Hey, John, Dan has a question.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see hands.
Okay. So on the new platforms,
Yep.
you've got an interesting list added there. Some things that I wouldn't necessarily recognize as confidential computing.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, maybe expand a little bit on maybe the first one there, Android Play.
Yeah, so
and
for
talk about
example,
how that
Android Play
compares.
has an API which protects applications, and the original intent of it was make sure you're talking to your application with no changes, and you get paid. If you're interacting with a service, you want to guarantee that they've done the genuine thing and they don't get saved. So that satisfies the measurement characteristic of confidential computing, although the measurement is done by the platform. So if you're a purist, you might say, oh, well, but I don't trust the OS. Android, though, has a pretty closed OS, and it's plausible. Don't forget, we don't make anybody do anything except by policy. So if you decide to trust the Android platform, you can do it. It also verifies things by an attestation-like mechanism, which we can adopt. And for secret storage, it provides secrets, independent storage mechanism for each one of these applications. So when you apply on the Android store for, I'm a new vendor with a new program that I want to protect in this mechanism, Android OS guarantees that the class of files you save are available only to you. So that lets us provide the confidential computing consortium stuff. And typically Android applications are written in a Java-like language. I mentioned we were thinking of doing a Java swig. That's the reason for doing the Java swig. And the real reason for doing this particular platform, we'll probably also do a secure client messaging application on this platform. The reason for doing this platform is we're trying to get more client systems. And this was a plausible, not perfect, but plausible platform to do that on. So
That makes sense.
yeah, okay, great. The science part of this is we want to develop a framework for using confidential computing more generally. So, confidential computing is great for principled security mechanism for small programs for which you believe you can verify their correctness. We're trying to develop a framework for composing programs, composing both independent confidential computing programs and non-confidential computing programs in a way that provides some safety guarantee that's not too, I don't know, artsy craftsy. It's a little bit more scientific. So that's what we're up to. Come on. Why won't it let me? Here we go. There are new contributors. I mentioned I started a company mainly to get research funding called Datica with Paul England and another person called To Nguyen. We've gotten more universities contribute. Maybe I should have mentioned this in applications. We're talking to somebody in DOE about adapting the framework to support scientific applications. So, many complex scientific applications collect lots of data. You want to make sure that's safe, both at collection and integrity protected, both at collection and where it's stored. So that's the idea. And we, as I mentioned, we have started talking to the German Academy of Sciences about some collaboration there, and the applications there are sort of like, as you'd expect, automobile manufacturing floors and some civil infrastructure. So those are the things we'd like to do in the future. We'd like more off-the-shelf applications as well as bespoke applications. We'd like to provide some things, maybe the client messaging thing, maybe the private data sharing, that people could just use the whole thing from the repository and not do any work except write what policy they wanted supported. With the Germans, we might, so we want to, as you've seen, support more platforms, and I would love to see more client platforms. So we're really hoping we can do ARM and RISC-V. They both have efforts underway to provide primitives that we could use. More standards participations. If we do the stuff with the Germans, we'll probably work with them on some standards groups for roughly some, access control languages. I mentioned we're looking at principled program composition of confidential computing programs and non-confidential computing programs. There's some talk about supporting cloud platforms in a way, again, off the shelf. You can just run on any platform and not work. I am not a cloud expert. It was designed so the primitives were absolutely independent of the cloud. But if we get this funding, we might have somebody actually go in and provide a standard package for the standard cloud so you don't have to do anything. And we would like to support different scenarios. So that's our life in hard times. Actually, the group has been pretty active. There's probably 2 or 3 months or 4 months after the acquisition of Broadcom, where I was busy doing other stuff. We hadn't started Datica, where we had the monthly meetings, but there was relatively little new stuff. But we're starting a phase where we're actually doing quite a lot of new stuff. So I'm very happy with that. And that's it. So questions?
Did I just a comment from Manu?
Yeah, go ahead. Just yell it out because I can't see the hand. Where is my thing? Oh, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you. Yeah, okay, go.
Yeah, sorry, I was putting it in the chat because I'm multitasking here, but I was just commenting on the use of the term confidential computing, which I think the CCC defines for hardware-based TE. So that's just my perspective. That although I understand the technology can be used in non-hardware-based environments, but I think from the CCC perspective, we may want to be careful about how we use the terms confidential computing.
I don't think we call the platforms confidential computing platforms. We call them platforms that provide confidential computing like primitives, but we warn people that it's not, it's not the same as a hardware platform. We have always supported a mechanism where a hardware platform can host a software-based infrastructure that supports these primitives. So for example, if you had a secure virtual machine that was protected by SEV, we can also run individual applications which have their own, which has a service which provides these 4 primitives. Of course, it's not hardware, so you have to trust whatever the OS is run by the VM to do the right job. But we're very careful to tell people the difference between hardware platforms and non-hardware platforms. Some of the ones we talked about there, I mean, maybe some of the providers would argue with you over whether they were hardware or not. So for example, most hardware supported confidential computing platforms are a combination of hardware and firmware. So possibly the Raspberry Pi guys would say that, well, that really fits your definition of confidential computing, if anything does. But yeah, I don't think we're confusing people with the difference between hardware platforms, which the CCC calls confidential computing, and non-hardware platforms, which are derivative platforms which provide some of the characteristics of confidential computing.
Okay, that's good. We would want to make sure that in any documentation, there's not conflation between something that's confidential computing and something that's just a different security approach. All right, so I appreciate if other TAC members can jump in here, taking a look at the checklist of things and asking for clarity if there's anything further needed.
Hi, John. Just one thing I want to check with you. The static analysis, I think you can check that off for the badge of best practice.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know if you have access to the badge edit prior.
I don't know. The guy who interacts with that stuff is Aditya, who's not on the call right now, but I will check with him.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, do let us know if you've got access to update the badge. I think in some cases, Sal, our previous community architect, had initiated these, and I don't know if there's an access control issue for people on the project to update
If
them
I have a
themselves.
problem, I'll send you guys a mail or something to get it straightened out, but I don't think there is.
Okay, great.
And I do have a question as well for you, Dan. Is there a project liaison?
That is an excellent question. So the short answer is no, we do not have a liaison assigned. And it would be helpful to hear from you and John whether that would be something that would be helpful and maybe what aspects of that might be helpful.
Well, I was just looking over this checklist, and those aspects, it would be good to have somebody
that's right,
helping to sort of shepherd that stuff along and make sure that we are doing the needful there. Because I think you did send me that list, and I apologize, but I hadn't seen it before. I don't know, last week, and I'm not quite sure what all of it involves. So, for example, I don't know that we have a quote charter unquote, and whether we need to develop one or not. So there have been no changes to that.
We did have a charter from VMware. We had
we had one.
It hasn't changed.
An internal one, right?
Well, but I think it's published in the repository, and
okay, right, yeah. So all of those kinds of structural issues, Dan. It would be good to have somebody who really knows the ins and outs of what's needed and all that. I think would be great.
Okay, that's helpful feedback to have. I'm inclined to think that it would be beneficial both for the TAC and for the projects to have that person that's maintaining some communication. And I know even just setting up the annual review, it can be hard for us to keep track of who's the main point of contact or the points of contact with a project.
Somebody asked me for the presentation, which I'm happy to give. Chris, can I mail it to you and have you post it wherever you're supposed to post it?
Will do.
Okay.
Or maybe we can even skip a hop there. If you just email it to Rian or
Oh,
Renu?
great. Yeah, I can do Rian.
Then that will go straight into the minutes, and then we can link it out from GitHub.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
So I think I'm just going to go down the checklist here. Let me share for providing some visual aid here. So I think we've talked about these. My screen to move around there. Okay, so the technical charter is what we were just talking about. That's one of the things that was
Yeah,
in the
and that has not
project
changed.
formation process, so that's fine, no change there. And then we've got different levels of project progression. We've simplified these, so it's really like, are you started? Do you have significant adoption? And then have you decided to stop? That's roughly I think the three that we have.
Okay.
So is there a change in the level of progression?
Yeah, we have a few more people using it who are not part of the project itself. I don't know whether that counts for being the middle one. We're definitely not the last. We're definitely not
Right.
giving up, right?
No, I think though we're still squarely in the incubation phase here.
Okay. And again, that should have been more clear to you had you have been assigned a project liaison.
Yep.
So usually projects forget that we do have some allocations available. So these are things like getting some travel funding to promote the project at a conference or CI funding. And I think we have these listed maybe at the top of this doc up here in the benefits. But they might be kind of spread out a couple other places, like the travel stuff might not be mentioned here.
Yeah, so far we've been pretty self-funded in that way. Like the two events we held were funded by the National Academy of Sciences. So I think we're good there. If we get the money for the company, then the company will probably provide some of that too.
Okay, and what about your infrastructure costs for
Test
CI?
infrastructure, we might, if we don't get this funding, would be helpful. So for example, we really don't have, we're begging for hardware to do our testing on. So that could be helpful to develop a test infrastructure. But I would hold off on asking for that, because if we get the funding we applied for this company, we'll just provide that test infrastructure.
Great. One thing that occurred to me while you were going that I didn't want to interrupt again, when it comes to like handheld devices with ARM, after your project was started, another project was offered by Samsung called Islet.
Yes,
And
we
that's kind of,
actually use Islet.
oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great intersection. Often projects kind of keep to themselves. So
Right.
I think if you guys were to maybe even write a little blog post about that, that would be really
Sure,
interesting
we can
for
do
the
that.
community.
Now, ARM is actually introducing newer technology than Islet used. I don't know if they're going to support that. If they do support it, we'll just use Islet, but if not, we'll support the ARM hardware itself.
Sounds good. You said your licensing was good, but I'm curious, are you using the scanning functionality from the Linux Foundation, or how are
I
you
don't think we
accomplishing
use
your
the scanning
licensing?
stuff. We do whatever we did before. It's the standard Apache license. There's nothing else. Well, there's one tiny bit in, no, I don't think that's not even, I thought, I was trying to remember whether there was a GPL driver somewhere, but I think we rewrote it to not be GPL, so it's all Apache code.
Okay, so there are tools that will scan your repo, and often they will give you a bunch of false positives, but they can identify if you have inadvertently included something that's outside of in your case, the Apache 2 license.
Okay, well, I'll look at it. We're actually, almost all the code that's in there now was the original VMware code, and the code contributed since that was code I personally wrote. So actually not too worried about that.
Okay. And then we just talked about the badge.
Yeah, we'll review the
and-
badges. The only one, I think I mentioned this, the only two I know we should probably do that we have not checked off is dynamic analysis and compiling with the -W all flag.
Great. And we can see your badge status up at the top of your project, so appreciate you including that there. Something that Hightow might start looking at is there's also from the OpenSSF is this project called Scorecards,
Mhm.
and that will automatically scan repositories and it will try to infer different aspects of your security posture. So we might be looking at applying that to projects. So that's something to just to give you a heads up on.
Okay, great.
Dan, you asked for a blog. I think that we had maybe not focused on that because I thought we had reported it last year, but here's a blog from Samsung on the relationship between ILET and the framework.
Oh, in chat.
Yeah. For those who are interested.
I don't think I've seen that either.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we can even reflect that back out on the CCC website if that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, there are actually other folks who have worked with this, so I don't know that we have an exhaustive list. It's a little hard to tell sometimes who's doing things.
Sure. Okay. But great to see Boktuk is promoting that. In fact, now that this is coming up, I kind of maybe remember that being in a discussion from the ILET side.
Yeah, we did a similar stuff with Keystone, which I guess is not, which is a RISC-V thing, which is not, I don't think they're in CCC, and they're in the same position. RISC-V is probably changing the hardware they use to support confidential computing. And if we can use a library that somebody has done to help do that, we'll do it. If not, we'll just do it ourselves.
And by the way, Dial, who is I think on the TAC, actually did a bunch of that work with.
He did. That's right.
Yes, and maybe I skipped over that in the update, but
I think he was
Dale
actually, yeah, he
He
was
wrote
actually.
some of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
He was not
Yeah,
at
so
TikTok at the time. He was at
He was at Berkeley
maybe
or Databricks or something. I don't know.
Databricks, one of those startups that came out of Berkeley.
yes, Dale has been in the community for quite some time, and now he is the alternate TAC rep for TikTok. And just looking to see if we have either of them on.
Actually,
usually we
hey,
have
I noticed the alternate's email is not on here. If you have Dale's email, I'd love to get it so I can just tell him what's going on by email.
Yeah, if somebody else has that and they can drop it in a chat, that would be great. I don't think I can access that right now. All right, other TAC members, questions, final thoughts?
Oh, that was easy. I could have guessed that.
Never know. So I think we might roll right from the project review into the discussion about this liaison status. And so here's certifier framework without anybody on there. We've got a couple other gaps in here and I think some out-of-date information. But before we do that, just wanted to say thanks for the good updates. It's great to see the project active and growing. And that should cover the annual update.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Okay, so we've had this kind of on and off again discussion about what we do on the TAC and whether that includes providing this liaison role to the projects. And I think we just heard a good example of the project not having been assisted on some of this annual update stuff and some of the very light governance that we applied to projects. There's some discussion about this on issue 207. But I think my summary thought on this that I dumped in maybe yesterday was that it seems like a really light ask of us that each of us spend like an hour with the project every quarter, make sure that we understand what's going on in the community of open source that we're supposed to be providing governance for. So with that thumb on the scales, I want to open it up to discussion from other TAC members about this liaison role. I'm just going to put this up so we can also kind of see where the gaps are and see who has been volunteering for that part of their role. Chris?
I just wanted to sort of revisit your question about like what would be helpful in this role. And there are there's the hygiene aspects of do we have the right badge and scanning the right the code with various tools and all that good stuff. But I think the most important thing is that we've seen connections between the Certifier Framework project, for example, and other things that are happening, like ILET. Sometimes we've talked to the folks in the Verizon team and other projects here, and I think there are interconnections that are worth surfacing and identifying. But unless you attend all of those meetings or the TAC, it's really hard to keep track of what's going on. So having somebody from the TAC who is able to help create connections and provide insights as to other stuff happening, I think is a really important function of this role.
Thank you, Chris. Paul?
Yes, hello. Sorry so first of all, I am sorry I joined the meeting late, but I am currently unvolunteered for any of these, and I am more than happy to step up and come into one of them. Probably the project I probably have the most connection with is actually Verizon, because I sit a few feet away from some of the people who actively work on it. But that has a liaison already. However, given what Chris was just saying about the connection with Verizon and the certifier framework, I wonder whether maybe that is a place where I could look at forming a bridge. I have to confess I'm not an expert on the certifier framework projects, but I'm more than happy to sort of ramp up on that one.
That's fantastic. And I think
Yeah.
we shouldn't feel like we have to be experts, but knowing something about a project versus nothing is like a big step function.
Yeah.
For any of us. So I will go ahead and write you in here.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
No problem.
Thanks, Paul.
You're very welcome. I mean, probably we need to connect and do some basic brainstorming and knowledge sharing, because I've not. I'm relatively new into the TAC, right? So I took over as ARM representative quite recently, which is why I'm not sort of very, very plugged into some of these other TAC activities. So I figure this is a good way to maybe get started.
Fantastic.
But I'm sort of finding my feet, right? So I'm glad that we do have a written charter to some extent for what the liaison needs to do. but also I guess different projects have different requirements. So yeah, maybe we should just hook up and explore what's needed and how I can add value.
Can you drop your email address back into the chat or something?
Sorry.
Can you drop your email address back
Oh
into
yeah,
the chat?
yeah, for sure. Yes. Let me do that.
Thank you. We'll send an email and set some time up.
Thank you.
Okay. So just looking at who we have in attendance, I think everybody else on the TAC already has an assignment here. So I might follow up with a couple of the other people who aren't present today and see about filling in these gaps. Unless somebody on the TAC wants to argue in favor of keeping this issue open, I'm going to just put in like some summary comments from our discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, Yash, I didn't notice your hand up. Go ahead.
That's okay. So a couple of things related here. So there was a note recently from Rian saying that the Veracruz project has reached end of active development. So if you go back, I think Thomas is assigned as the project liaison there. And if you're moving the project to the emeritus stage, then that should free up Thomas to be a liaison for another project.
It could, though I should be fair to Thomas that he is no longer, he was the ARM representative before moving to Lenaro. And then I think Nathaniel briefly stepped in before Howard. So Thomas might want to continue to contribute from that perspective, but it would be a outside of his immediate responsibilities.
Also, speaking of Nathaniel, I know he's not here to defend himself per se, but he's not assigned as a liaison yet, and he's part of the TAC as AMD's rep. So
That's correct.
I can reach out to him, and I know he has been liaison in the past, so maybe he would be willing to do the same for either Keystone or Grambin.
Yeah, that would be great. I would appreciate that. Yeah, I think Grambin in particular would probably share some similarities with Anarchs. That might be a stretch, but I think that would be interesting. But really, either of those. And then we also have Kevin and sorry, Henry and Kevin. Either of them also need some assignment here. So unless, and we've got Bob joining as well, so Bob's still got to get up to speed, but I think we've got enough people to cover the projects. So unless somebody wants to step up and say, yes, let's keep this issue open, I'm going to suggest that we close the issue, and I'm going to put in some summary comments that we've got feedback that this is a useful role, and each TAC member should have bandwidth to accommodate that.
Maybe as an only comment, so if we don't assign one for Veracruz, are we sure that all of the others need a mentor or like a liaison? So for example, I don't know, don't shoot me for this question, but projects like Enarx or others, so should we like just check whether they're still actively going?
That is exactly why, I think that's exactly why we should have a project liaison. So if we haven't heard from a project like Anarchs for a while, but we had somebody assigned to it, they would probably know, yeah, that project's still going, or no, we haven't been able to maintain contact with a maintainer and it's time to put it to emeritus.
Yeah, fair enough. Sure, that's one way to go for it.
Good question. Okay, So I'll look through that after the meeting, and I wanted to hold time available for Mark if he had any issues. But I do not see Mark Novak on, so I think work is progressing well within that forming SIG. And we've got the note to the list with some of the status on the charter. And with that, I think we'll try to spend like the last few minutes going into the other list of things that are TAC member responsibilities. So headed into the beginning of the year, we tried to set some objectives. They're sort of loosely summarized here where people were volunteering. And so I haven't updated this, I guess, from at the end of the year. Henry and Kevin have talked about a project that they're working on that they want to bring through, so that will end up in the projects category. I think we do have that in this table up here. So we'll have to see where Bob wants to contribute. Nathaniel had suggested some things around the supply chain and attestation, and I don't think we were able to get him for today, but we need him to fill in his goals. And I don't see Alec yet, right? But he typically has been contributing in the GRC SIG, aligned with this idea of affecting the ecosystem. We'll have to check in with Howard offline because this is outside of his normal working hours. We just talked about Canary in Heaven and the project they're going to do. We heard from Catherine last time on the Linux kernel SIG. Catherine I think maybe there was still an open on whether or not the calendar update was solid and we had a public agenda and minutes.
Yeah, I think we have settled on a calendar and the cadence of the meeting. Yeah, as far as I know, I think everything is established.
Okay, great. And then not to put you on the spot, do you remember the next session coming up for that one?
So the cadence is monthly. I don't remember the exact date. It should be a Thursday evening, I think.
That
US.
sounds right.
Yeah, time. So.
Okay, well, maybe if you can find that as I move along here and drop it in the chat, and then we know when the next session is.
What's it?
Fritz, we'll talk about yours with academia.
Yeah, I think there's honestly nothing new since we last talked about this. Bit more on the back burner, but I actually have a bigger question right now. How many talks do we have scheduled for the next meetings?
I don't think we have anything. Oh no, we've got one more scheduled. So we have one more scheduled in the beginning of April, but we don't have one scheduled for next session. We will have 2 projects coming in for their annual updates, but no tech talks.
Okay. So maybe we should go out and source some more.
Yeah, to that end, I know we've talked a couple times about can we get a FAQ posted on the governance repo? It'd be good to get that up, and that can also kind of help us circulate that for advertising what kind of things we're looking for, but also little details about how they get in touch and so forth.
Yeah, I didn't forget that. I'll get on.
The other thing that I was hoping maybe NVIDIA would like to offer is a talk on securing devices, and it could be SmartNIC, it could be GPU, but I know at least from a CPU perspective, I think a lot about what goes on with main memory. And I don't know much about how to make sure that a card has its, I don't know, base memory register blocks locked out and things like that.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that as well. So I'll have some talks internally to see if we can have something like this. But I also saw some, to give a different perspective than just a company talking about it. I saw some papers floating around to securing accelerators, which are of course different than what companies are doing, but might just be interesting to see some research perspective on this as well. So I think both angles might be interesting for the folks here.
Yeah, definitely. So whether it comes from one of our companies or an academic source, I do think that this year in particular is a lot about bringing devices into the TCB, and understanding how to do that securely is probably good for everybody to start getting their mind around.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that was everybody, because we don't have Mingshen on, but Mingshen has put out a proposal to the board to fund academic research. And the exact nature of that is in the proposal. I think the gist is companies could elect to donate additional money and then be on a selection committee for how that money finds its way into academic projects. So if you'd like to know more about that, you can circle up with your board member and maybe help inform them on what would be helpful from a technical perspective. And if you don't have a board member and you're trying to figure out, or you want to feed some thoughts into that process, feel free to send that to the mail list or here. And I think, so these last couple slides are just the tables that we were showing. So I think with that, we're at the end of our agenda. Chris?
Yeah, on the academic computing front, I just wanted to mention that last year, let's see, it was last year, the NSF had issued a solicitation on privacy enhancing, privacy in practice was the name of the solicitation, and they specifically called out confidential computing. It's a joint activity with the NSF and Intel and a number of others, and I hear they got a very strong response to that, but they're still deciding on their. I don't believe that any awards have yet been announced. So when that happens, I think that'll be a really exciting thing to hear about. So we should think about keeping that in mind for the academic engagements too, because that'll add a lot of impetus to this movement.
Great. I had missed a couple messages in chat. So if I go to the right tab of this, someone was reaching out, and I won't put them on the spot, volunteering to also be a liaison, even though they're not like a voting member of the TAC. And that is something we've always historically done. So kind of like the discussion about Thomas, so long as somebody is in connection with the TAC and they want to provide that connection with a project, that's great. But we in particular want to make sure that each TAC voting member is fulfilling their responsibilities. And then also thanks to Catherine, who posted the next session for the kernel SIG is the 13th. So that must be about a week out from today, or exactly a week out from today. And I think the regular to-do item for that is sending out soliciting for agenda items out on the Linux Cocoa mail list. So Catherine, whether that's you or Stephen or whomever, that would be great to make sure that we've got the the meeting well utilized.
Yep, sounds good.
Thank you. All right, and now I think we're really done with the agenda, unless anybody else had one last thing. Does not look like it. So thank you, everybody, for an engaging meeting, and we will stay connected on the lists and so forth, and in our separate working groups, and come back again in a couple weeks.